Let me say this clearly from the beginning, because if you misunderstand this part, everything else in this video will be useless. Alzheimer's disease and dementia do not suddenly appear when you become old. They are not accidents, and they are not simply the result of bad luck. They are the final outcome of how a person has lived, thought, eaten, moved, and treated their brain for many years, sometimes for decades without realizing it. Most people are afraid of getting old, but what they are really afraid of is not aging itself. It is the fear of losing their memory, losing their independence, forgetting their own children, repeating the same questions again and again, and slowly becoming a burden to the people they love. And the most painful part is that when Alzheimer's begins, the person often does not even realize what is happening to them. This is why this video is not meant to scare you, but it is also not meant to comfort you, because comfort is useless if it keeps you asleep. What you need is awareness, discipline, and action while you still have time. Because once Alzheimer's and dementia fully develop, no medicine, no doctor, and no amount of regret can bring your memory back. So if you are listening to this and you are over 50, over 60, or even over 70, understand this very clearly. What you do starting today will determine whether you keep your mind sharp in the years ahead or slowly lose control over your own thoughts and memories. Now let's talk about the first and most dangerous mistake older people make. Point 1. Believing that memory loss is just normal aging. One of the biggest reasons Alzheimer's disease becomes so common in older adults is because many people convince themselves that forgetting things is simply a normal part of getting old. And once they accept that idea, they stop paying attention, they stop correcting themselves, and they stop challenging their brain. When an older person forgets a name, forgets why they entered a room, tells the same story again and again, or feels confused about dates and places, they often laugh it off and say, "I'm old, that's normal." But what they don't realize is that every time they excuse memory problems instead of addressing them, they are giving the brain permission to decline faster. A healthy aging brain may slow down, yes, but it should not collapse. It should not lose basic orientation, and it should not repeatedly fail at simple daily tasks. And when these things start happening, they are warning signs, not jokes, not personality traits, and definitely not something to ignore. The brain is not a passive organ that simply fades with age. It is more like a muscle, and when you stop using it with intention, when you stop pushing it to remember, to focus, to solve problems, and to stay alert, it weakens, shrinks, and becomes more vulnerable to disease. This is why the moment you say, "I'm old, so forgetting is normal," you begin the slow process of mental surrender. And surrender is exactly what Alzheimer's feeds on. Point 2. Living on autopilot and stopping mental efforts. Another silent but powerful cause of dementia in older adults is living life on autopilot, doing the same things every day, following the same routines, watching the same television shows, having the same conversations, and never asking the brain to do anything new or uncomfortable. Many people retire and think that rest means turning the brain off, but in reality, rest without stimulation is one of the fastest ways to cognitive decline, because the brain needs challenge in order to stay alive, flexible, and strong. When you stop learning, stop reading seriously, stop thinking deeply, and stop engaging in meaningful mental efforts, the brain slowly becomes lazy, and a lazy brain is a vulnerable brain, especially in old age. This does not mean you need to study difficult subjects or do complex mathematics, but it does mean you must remain mentally active, curious, and slightly uncomfortable, because comfort may feel good in the moment, but it quietly weakens the mind over time. Many older people spend hours every day watching television or scrolling on their phones, believing they are relaxing, when in fact they are overstimulating the eyes while understimulating the brain. And this imbalance slowly erodes attention span, memory, and mental clarity. If you want to avoid Alzheimer's, you must understand this simple truth. A brain that is not challenged is a brain that is slowly being prepared for decline. Point 3. Eating for convenience, not for the brain. One of the biggest lies older people believe is that once they reach a certain age, food no longer matters, that they have already lived most of their life, so eating whatever is easy, cheap, or familiar is good enough. But the truth is that what you eat in your later years may matter even more than what you ate when you were young, especially when it comes to protecting your brain. The brain is made largely of fat, and it is extremely sensitive to inflammation, blood sugar spikes, and poor circulation. So when an older person eats too much sugar, refined carbohydrates, fried food, and processed meals day after day, they are not just damaging their heart or their weight, they are slowly starving their brain of the nutrients and oxygen it needs to function properly. Many people do not realize that Alzheimer's disease is often called type 3 diabetes because of how closely it is linked to insulin resistance and unstable blood sugar. And when the brain cannot properly use glucose for energy, memory and thinking are among the first things to suffer. Eating the same white rice, instant noodles, sweet snacks, and oily dishes every day may feel comforting, but comfort is not nourishment, and over time, this way of eating creates chronic inflammation in the brain, damages blood vessels, and increases the risk of cognitive decline. If you want to avoid Alzheimer's, you must start thinking of food not as pleasure or habit, but as fuel for the brain, meaning more vegetables, more natural fats, enough protein, and far less sugar, because the brain ages faster when it is constantly inflamed and undernourished. This is not about dieting or suffering, it is about understanding that every meal is either supporting your brain or quietly working against it. Point 4. Sitting too much and moving too little. Another major reason Alzheimer's and dementia become so common in older age is not just physical inactivity, but the belief that slowing down means sitting down, and that rest means avoiding movement, when in reality, too much sitting is one of the most dangerous habits for the aging brain. Movement is not only for the muscles and joints, it is one of the strongest stimulants for the brain because every time you walk, stretch, or move with intention, you increase blood flow, oxygen, and nutrients to the brain, which helps keep brain cells alive and connected. When older adults spend most of their day sitting, whether watching television, lying down, or staying indoors, circulation slows, muscles weaken, and the brain receives less oxygen. And over time, this reduced blood flow contributes directly to memory problems and mental fog. Many people think exercise must be intense to be useful, but that is not true, because even simple daily movement, such as walking, light stretching, gardening, or doing housework with awareness, can significantly improve brain health if it is done consistently. The real danger is not lack of strength, it is lack of movement, because a body that barely moves sends a message to the brain that it is no longer needed, and the brain responds by slowly shutting down unused pathways. If you want to keep your mind clear as you age, you must keep your body moving, not to chase youth, but to protect function, independence, and mental clarity for as long as possible. Point 5. Living in silence, isolation, and loneliness. One of the most underestimated dangers to the aging brain is not physical illness, not even poor diet, but long-term loneliness, social withdrawal, and living too much in silence, because the human brain is designed to stay alive through connection, conversation, and emotional exchange. When an older person gradually stops talking to others, stops sharing thoughts, stops telling stories, and stops being listened to, the brain receives less stimulation, fewer emotional signals, and fewer reasons to stay sharp. And over time, this emotional silence slowly turns into cognitive silence. Many older adults do not realize they're becoming isolated because it happens quietly. Friends pass away, children become busy, conversations become shorter, and one day the house becomes very quiet, and at first it feels peaceful, but later it becomes empty, and the brain does not thrive in emptiness. Conversation is not just communication, it is brain exercise, because when you speak, listen, remember, respond, and adjust your words, multiple areas of the brain are activated at the same time, and without this regular activation, those areas weaken and disconnect. This is why people who live alone, speak less, and rarely engage in meaningful conversation have a much higher risk of dementia, not because they are weak, but because their brain is slowly starving from lack of interaction. If you want to protect your memory, you must protect your connections. Even simple daily conversations, phone calls, or short social interactions can keep the brain engaged and emotionally alive, which is something no medication can replace. Point 6. Chronic stress, anger, and negative thinking. Another silent killer of the aging brain is long-term stress, unresolved anger, bitterness, and constant negative thinking, especially when these emotions are carried for years without release, because the brain cannot stay healthy in a state of emotional tension. Many older adults believe stress disappears after retirement, but in reality, stress often changes shape, turning into worry about health, money, children, loneliness, or regret. And when these thoughts repeat daily, they create a constant state of mental pressure that damages memory and concentration. Chronic stress releases hormones that slowly shrink the memory center of the brain, interfere with learning, and make the brain more vulnerable to neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's. And this damage happens quietly, without obvious pain, until one day memory begins to fail. Holding on to anger, resentment, or disappointment is especially dangerous in old age because these emotions keep the brain stuck in the past, replaying negative experiences instead of adapting and staying flexible. And a rigid mind ages faster than a flexible one. Letting go does not mean forgetting what happened. It means refusing to let the past continue damaging your brain in the present. Because peace of mind is not just emotional comfort, it is a form of brain protection. If you want to keep your mind clear, you must learn to calm your thoughts, release emotional tension, and choose mental peace, not because life was fair, but because your brain deserves care. Point 7. Poor sleep and ignoring the brain's nightly cleaning system. One of the most ignored but most powerful protectors of the brain is sleep, especially deep, regular, and uninterrupted sleep, because this is the only time when the brain truly cleans itself, repairs damaged cells, and removes toxic waste that builds up during the day. Many older adults sleep poorly and accept it as normal aging. They go to bed late, wake up many times during the night, watch television until they fall asleep, or rely on sleeping pills without addressing the real problem, not realizing that poor sleep is strongly linked to memory loss and dementia. During deep sleep, the brain activates a cleaning system that flushes out harmful proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. And when sleep is short, shallow, or constantly interrupted, this cleaning process becomes incomplete, allowing these toxic substances to accumulate over time. Lack of sleep also increases stress hormones, disrupts blood sugar control, weakens attention, and makes emotional regulation more difficult, all of which accelerate cognitive decline, especially in older age when the brain is already more vulnerable. Sleeping well is not about staying in bed longer. It's about creating a consistent routine, going to bed at the same time, reducing light and noise, calming the mind before sleep, and treating sleep as a priority rather than an afterthought. If you want to protect your brain, you must protect your sleep, because a brain that does not rest properly cannot stay sharp, no matter how good your diet or how much you exercise. Let me end this video with a simple but uncomfortable truth. Alzheimer's disease and dementia are not just medical problems, they are lifestyle outcomes. And while not every case can be prevented, many cases can be delayed, slowed, or even avoided through conscious daily choices. You cannot control your age, your genetics, or everything that happens in life, but you can control how you eat, how you move, how you think, how you connect with others, how you manage stress, and how seriously you protect your sleep. Every small habit you repeat daily is either strengthening your brain or weakening it. And the brain does not respond to intentions, it responds to actions repeated over time. It is never too early to protect your mind, and it is never too late to start caring for it. But the longer you wait, the less room you leave for improvement. Do not wait for a diagnosis to take your brain seriously, because prevention is always easier than repair, and awareness today is worth more than regret tomorrow. If this video made you think even a little, then it already did its job. If you are over 50, over 60, or caring for someone who is, do not keep this information to yourself. Share it with your family, your friends, or anyone you love, because protecting the brain is not just a personal responsibility, it's a shared one. Subscribe to this channel if you want honest conversations about aging, health, and living with dignity, not fear, because growing older does not mean losing your mind if you are willing to live with awareness and discipline. And remember this one thing: the goal is not to live forever. The goal is to stay clear, present, and mentally alive for as long as life allows. Thank you for listening.